Wagwan. Good morning, good night, welcome back. And if you're listening for the first time, I'm your host, Melanie Byfield, welcoming you to episode 25 of The Real Situation, where we give you a taste of Jamaican politics. Nothing from the Joint Select Committee since June 4, when we last heard that the committee's draft report had been circulated to its members, but there's plenty to talk about still. When I first became aware that Jamaica was becoming a republic, I remember reading an article in the Ward Post by Professor Rosalie Hamilton called Our Jamaican Republic, the Bread and Butter Issues. This goes back to July 26, 2022, and it gave the answer to a question that I had, and I'm sure many Jamaicans had too, about how is constitutional reform going to improve my life. Professor Hamilton stated that for many Jamaicans, this constitutional reform move is inconsequential. It no matter because it seems unconnected to their day-to-day struggles of eat a food or step up in a life, right? Professor Hamilton goes on to say that the argument even extends to those who are considered to be more affluent, right, concerning their improvement in standard of living. And, this bread and butter economic issue is actually the central objective of creating a republic and what links the Jamaican people to this constitutional reform. So the real vital link can be seen in historical records, right? It describes the central role of a very unjust system of the monarchy, which supported very oppressive laws, created and ensured that the economic institution of slavery and colonialization continued. And this also includes laws that prevented enslaved Africans from keeping anything from horses to mares or mules, and the laws also actually prevented and restricted land title being given to free Africans. These legal restrictions stifled economic opportunity to own or control property for business development and created squatting communities that have persisted as part of our colonial legacy. Now, instead of laws and policies and institutions that have thwarted the economic potential of the majority of Jamaicans, the transition to a republic is an opportunity to modify and create laws, policies, and institutional arrangements that empower the Jamaican people to improve their standard of living. This must be the central component of the transition to a Jamaican republic. After all, as a quote I saw goes, republicanism is desirable so long as the content of the bottle is reflected by the new label on the bottle. You know that one there, right? You can't put old wine in a new bottle. It says, it goes on to say, if a new skin is being proposed, it only stands to reason that a new wine be brewed to keep any mismatch from the scene. There was a submission made to members of Parliament, a submission relating to the bill that was tabled. This submission was submitted by Professor Hamilton, the Advocates Network, Jamaica Council of Churches, Institute of Law and Economics, JABEM, Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement, among other civil society organizations and individuals. And this submission asserted that the Parliamentary Cabinet system, aka the Westminster System of political governance, is flawed, and it contributes to poor governance and the inability to address the economic, social and environmental challenges that the country faces. And as a result, it enables the following to continue. The following 4 things. Number 1, top-down governance. This allows the concentration of power in the cabinet led by the Prime Minister. Number 2, authoritarian leadership, which weakens democracy and the economy. Inadequate mechanisms for the people's voice to be heard, and a colonial judicial structure. I am going to run quickly back to that word authoritarian. And authoritarianism is a political system or leadership style that's characterized by strong central power. Basically, the voices of the people are suppressed and individual freedoms are limited. So the real assertion being made in this submission is that good governance promotes economic growth, right? Active engagement and inclusion of the public is a form of good governance. So we're going to talk about an example of how the inclusion of the public could lead to the promotion of economic growth, right? And the example that I'm going to use is ganja. Legalization was decided or not decided by referendum on the US state level. Most states want it legalized fully, and others did not. Maybe that should be a factor in Jamaica, right? Let the people decide. There's a general election that's due soon. You could have a referendum and put that one question on the ballot. As an example, the ballot in New Jersey said it was titled Constitutional Amendment to Legalize Marijuana, and it basically asked, do you approve of amending the Constitution to legalize a controlled form of marijuana called cannabis? It stated that only adults of 21, at least 21, could use it. The state commission that was created to oversee the state's medical cannabis program would also oversee the new personal use cannabis market. Any cannabis products would be subject to the state sales tax, and if authorized by the legislature, a municipality could pass a local ordinance to charge a local tax on cannabis products. And to all of that stuff, you either put down a yes or a no, right? That's simple. Now, let's take the issue a little further and look at the potential effect on the Jamaican economy. And we're not even going to front here, right? A lot of people who travel to Jamaica to vacation and who live in Jamaica like to smoke ganja. And before all the educated people start and yam up themselves, let me just remind you that no one has ever been unalived by ganja. Now, when you look at alcohol-related illnesses, that kills in the region of 178,000 people in the United States alone every year. It's actually the leading preventable cause of death in the United States. And that's according to the CDC, right? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. These deaths are either caused from drinking alcohol over several years or drinking too much on one occasion. Brethren, trust me, you smoke too much ganja, all I go do, I go sleep. But on a more serious note, medical marijuana, right? It's prescribed by a doctor, and it can be prescribed for conditions like anxiety, cancer, chronic pain, glaucoma, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, HIV, AIDS, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's a big one for former service men and women. Seizures, epilepsy, and terminal illnesses. Okay, so back to the Jamaican economy. I looked for a US state to use as an example that's got a similar population size to Jamaica and has legalized ganja. And that state was New Mexico. New Mexico first licensed sales of recreational ganja in April 2022. Their regulatory website says, a well-regulated cannabis industry will contribute to New Mexico's economic development, job growth, tax revenue, and safer access to adult and medical use cannabis. That is it. Their cannabis reporting online portal shows all-time sales of 1,743,854,173 US dollars. So that's from April 2022 to whenever they updated that website. One would think within the last few days. What's today? July 10. What is that in Jamaican dollars? That's 278,391,697,000 and boof. Ganja is legal in 24 states in the United States. 40 states have legalized it for medicinal purposes. It's still a Class 1 drug under the Controlled Substances Act, making it still illegal at the federal level. Drop the ball on that one, Joe. So imagine what that kind of revenue could do for the Jamaican economy. And also bear in mind, New Mexico, their population is less than Jamaica's. It's a little over 2 million. And it doesn't have anywhere near the number of tourists that Jamaica has, right? And again, a lot of people who go to Jamaica want to smoke weed. New Mexico, in 2023, they had 680,000 international visitors. How much Jamaica have? 4.1 million international visitors in 2023. There's also the opportunity for the creation of additional jobs through full production. So that means not only growing, but selling it as edibles, pre-rolls, drinks. See, a lot of developing countries, right, tend to be, kind of screwed over by developed countries who buy their raw materials, and I ate that, right? But they go on to produce and generate products that earn much more income from that side of it, right? So Jamaica really could do a start to finish and earn, maximize the amount of money that could be made out of that product, right? Yeah, so we were imagining what 278 billion Jamaican dollars could do for the economy. In a Jamaica Gleaner article in 2017, the now disgraced former Minister of Education, Roel Reid, talked about how he was going to be working to ensure that new high schools could be delivered over a 5-year period. And he said that it would cost $1 billion to build a school and outfit it with all the necessary equipment. Well, I'm a little bit now. Was that before or after he was charged with corruption and misuse of public funds at the Education Ministry and the CMU, the Caribbean Maritime University? Okay, it was after. it was after them charge him and strip him of his ministerial duties in 2019. It was him, his wife Sharon, the daughter Sherelle, former CMU President Fritz Pinnock, and a JLP councillor for Brownstown, Kim Brown. They were charged with a range of offences that included breaches of Corruption Prevention Act, conspiracy to defraud, misconduct in a public office at common law, and breaches of the Proceeds of Crime Act. They were charged by the Financial Investigations Division following a probe into nearly 50 million that was allegedly diverted from the CMU. So yeah, as long as the money ain't being diverted, that breed of money can build all heap of schools, right? And then you wouldn't have people being damn fresh to talk about. Yes, my youth, me go build you a prison, you don't need no school. It would be nice to be able to say, brethren, keep your prison. I can build a school. All right, so where are we? Okay, so where is Jamaica, ganja, and the Cannabis Licensing Authority at right now? So the Cannabis Licensing Authority, the CLA, was established in 2015, and they started operations in 2016 with a specified role, which is to establish and regulate Jamaica's legal ganja and hemp industry. In Jamaica, it is legal for medicinal, therapeutic, or scientific uses, and it's decriminalized for possession of up to 2 ounces. Can you import it and export it? Yeah, man. The CLA says, while the promulgation of local import/export regulations are pending, the authority has put in place interim administrative procedures to facilitate the export of ganja by licensees that hold a valid import permit from the country that the product will be exported to. So in other words, they're still working on the rules around importing and exporting, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so where is Jamaica? Yes, the recreational use of ganja remains illegal, so you can grow it to sell for medicinal or therapeutic purposes and export it, but you cannot walk into a store and buy it. You know, I couldn't even find out how much money Jamaica make from weed. I see lots of projections and how they're waiting for the US to pass some banking law. And that's because it can't run through the banking system because it's not legal on the federal level in America. But my question is, what the fuck that got to do with Jamaica? So this act, the SAFE, S-A-F-E Banking Act of 2020, became the Secure and Fair Enforcement Regulation Banking Act, or the Safer Banking Act. And it's been fast asleep since 2023. In the meantime, ganja is legal in Uruguay, Thailand, and Canada. Actually, I saw an article called Canadian Cannabis Sales Soared in December. In 2024, total sales increased 1.5% to 5.24 billion Canadian dollars. So in Jamaican dollars, that is 606 billion 389 million and 46,000 ambush. So while New Mexicans and Canadians are getting redder than red and shiting money from weed sales, Jamaica's waiting on a banking law and taking some other route other than asking the people. Okay, so licenses. New Mexico has issued 3,071 weed licenses to date, right? That means a license to either grow it, transport it, or sell it. On the CLA website, it said that as of December 31, 2024, there were 166 licenses issued. There's only 16 I could see on the site that, right, I don't know why that was, but they only showed 16. And of that 16, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the companies were from the UK, one of which has been dissolved. One from Canada. One is unknown. 2 are US R&D, research and development companies, and the others are Jamaican. And the interesting thing, the Jamaican companies, one is called Hedo Weedo, that leases space in hedonism too. That brethren was quite interesting. And I say that like totally sarcastically, because he didn't really seem to care about recreational weed. Talked about the need for edibles and people to basically come to a resort to smoke weed. Problematic, right? Yeah. And then there was Island Kaya Farms, that's Jamaican owned. Island Strains, Mez Herbal, and then there is 2 companies, 420 Ganja Bliss and 420 Therapeutic Bliss, and those are owned by Michael Frater, who's a retired Jamaican sprinter, and those are, I believe, located in Kingston and Runaway Bay. So, speaking of interesting articles, right, June 6, there was an article in The Observer where Richard Branson, Virgin Airlines owner, was saying how Jamaica can lead the way in global ganja train. Brethren, we know. But the thing is, how's that going to happen when you have hoteliers like Mr. Hedo Weedo who only want tourists to smoke weed, right? Medicinally and therapeutically, of course, at their resorts. Everybody else can grow and export it, but can't walk into a store and buy it legally. Okay, so we just talked about how an inclusive public through good governance can contribute to economic growth, right? Because the example that we just talked about in New Mexico is the people decided that they wanted, ganja to be legalized in their state. So how else does good governance contribute to economic growth? Good governance promotes innovation and creativity, and that can lead to, producing globally competitive goods and services. There is also the eliminating of corruption. As we have spoken about before, the Jamaican economy loses 100 billion Jamaican dollars every year as a result of corruption. I was watching Kwame Thomas's show on CEEN TV called The Conversations. Really good show, actually. I like it. And he was speaking to a representative of the UIC. Brethren, I'm so sorry. Don't have your name handy, but he was speaking about how the UIC would eliminate a lot of taxes, and when he was asked, okay, how are you going to pay for stuff? Because you're taking away a lot of revenue. He was like, yeah, but we would work on drastically eliminating corruption, because it's all your money that can use for the things that you need, right? That a government's supposed to have the money to do. Like, for example, in Clear Spring in Portland, that's a community where they are heavily inconvenienced by a missing bridge. It's a footbridge that used to be a bridge that you could drive a car over, and now it's a footbridge. So you have to stop one side and walk over the bridge to the other side, and you may have one bag of groceries, or you could have 12 pieces zinc or 500 concrete block. You're walking that stuff over, right? And then backside, when the river come down, when that happens, people get stuck because you cannot cross it. How else does good governance contribute to economic growth? Members of Parliament who are held accountable for their performance, achieving community goals and working with a proper job description, right? Having to answer to their constituents. Dion Jackson Miller did a podcast called How Do We Get Rid of Politicians? That was on June 27. And she spoke about term limits. And that's a topic that was raised by the public at some of the 6 town hall meetings that took place, but were not included in the bill that's proposing to reform the Constitution, right? Dion says, for me, when you have an MP who's been in office for 3 terms, the question isn't if we should have an automatic shut-off after 2 terms. It's, does the person deserve another term? So if you have an excellent MP who's showing up to Parliament and does the work on the ground, is in touch with constituents, is meeting constituents, having those community development meetings, doing constituency development stuff, plans, do we really want to say that they can only serve 2 terms? Therefore, Dion says that she doesn't support term limits as finding a way to hold MPs accountable. She goes on to say, if we're on the job and not doing the job, there are ways to sanction us. We need a mechanism to sanction non-performing MPs and ultimately be able to send them at a yard. Well, she didn't say that. She said to send them home. Voting every 5 years, Dion goes on to say, is not a way to hold them accountable. That's letting them off the hook, spending 2, 3, 4 years collecting taxpayer money and not doing enough work. The problem we want to fix is non-performance and stagnation, but that's not fixed by retirement ages and term limits. So to me, it sounds like recall and impeachment provisions would fix the problem that Dion's talking about. And again, those were raised, those were issues that were raised by the public, but not included in the bill. Another way good governance creates or could contribute to economic growth is responsible and accountable use of tax dollars. The rich feel they're above paying, the poor don't want to pay because they can't see their tax dollars at work, and in the meantime, you have crumbling infrastructure, inconsistent and expensive power, little bit of water, blah, blah, blah. You know all of that, right? Okay. All right. So let's switch topic to the big pothole that's been blocking the road to Jamaica becoming a republic for a long time now. Angela Brown Burke, in an article in The Observer, she slammed the current administration over its foreign policy, calling for honest discussion on the CCJ. I'll read you a little bit of that article. So basically she said that the framers couldn't have expected the Privy Council to remain after 63 years of independence. That's why they didn't entrench it. She goes on to say, we speak the language of decolonisation, but we maintain the King's Court as the highest authority in our justice system. This contradiction is no longer defensible. It places real justice out of the reach of everyday Jamaicans, and worse, it undermines our very identity as a free and independent people and makes a mockery of our efforts at becoming, in every true sense, fully free. So let's have the conversation boldly, openly, and honestly. She goes on to say, let us talk about adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final appellate court, our court, built by us, for us. These are not merely legal issues. They're national questions demanding full action in our national interest. They go to the heart of who we are and who we want to become, said Ms. Brownberg. Now, as we know, there was a very proud moment that occurred on July 6. And the Honourable Prime Minister still didn't want to have the conversation. I'm going to read you from an excerpt from an article. 15 years ago, Winston Anderson stood at King's House in Kingston, Jamaica, being sworn in as the youngest judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ. On Sunday, in a powerful, full-circle moment, he returned to the spotlight, this time as the court's fourth president, assuming leadership on the cusp of the 49th meeting of CARICOM heads of government in Montego Bay. Delivering his inaugural address before regional leaders, including Prime Minister Holness and the Governor-General, Sir Patrick Allen, President Anderson issued a direct and passionate appeal for CARICOM states, particularly Jamaica, to fulfill their treaty obligations and accede to the CCJ's appellate jurisdiction. He says, it was on the 15th of June 2010 that I was sworn in as a judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice at King's House in Kingston. Today's event would not even have been within the reach of my most active imagination. He said, beginning in the 1960s, we extracted our political independence from the United Kingdom. 40 years later, we created an institution worthy of our judicial sovereignty. He looked directly at the audience and said, I am hopeful that during my tenure, other states will fulfill their treaty obligations and become full members of the appellate jurisdiction. And as we know, Jamaica remains one of those countries yet to join the court in its appellate capacity. President Anderson emphasized that the CCJ wasn't imposed on the Caribbean by any foreign power. He says it was conceived and established by the people of the Caribbean to serve Caribbean interests. Noting that even beyond its 5 appellate states, Barbados, Belize, Guyana, Dominica, and St. Lucia, its judgments are cited in nearly every common law Caribbean jurisdiction, promising to intensify the court's itinerant sit-ins. That's when they travel, right? Because the court doesn't sit only in Trinidad, it sits in the various member countries. Anderson said he wanted the people of the region to see us, interact with us, and realize that we are, in fact, their kith and kin. Staying on that subject for a little longer, in an article in the UK Voice on April 8, the former Prime Minister of Trinidad, Keith Rowley, was saying that his country should actually exit the UK Privy Council. Sir Rowley vex, because the Home Office, the UK Home Office, announced that Trinidad now needs a visa to enter the UK as a tourist. I am going to leave you with an article And I'd like to read you, it's not the entirety of the article, there's certain sections of it, but it was an article that I saw in the Gleaner on June 15 by Jalil Dabdoob, and it's called Jamaica at a Crossroads, a Nation in Need of Leadership. Jamaica stands at a critical crossroads. We are a nation blessed with extraordinary resilience and cultural brilliance, yet gripped by persistent crime, economic inequality, and a creeping erosion of public trust in institutions. At the heart of this national unease lies a style of governance that has too often favoured political convenience over constitutional integrity and long-term national interest. This isn't merely a moment of political challenge in a crisis. It's a crisis. This isn't merely a moment of this isn't merely a moment of policy challenge. It's a crisis of moral leadership. For too long, governance in Jamaica has been shaped by a politics of expedience, when short-term advantage eclipses long-term vision and constitutional boundaries are treated not as sacred guardrails, but as inconveniences to be manoeuvred around. The time has come for a higher kind of leadership, one grounded not in tribal loyalty or transactional calculation, but in sacrifice, principle, and the courage to place the national interest above personal or party gain. This is a moment that demands not a change of party, but a change of political culture. At its heart, Jamaica's crisis is not only institutional or political, it is moral. It's the steady corrosion of public ethics, the normalization of impunity, like being above the law, the casual acceptance of mediocrity, the belief that power entitles rather than obligates. In such an environment, leadership too easily becomes a theatre of optics rather than a vocation of service. What Jamaica now requires is sacrificial leadership, the willingness to forego personal or partisan gain in pursuit of national renewal. Leadership that is not content to manage decline but determined to pursue transformation. Leadership that understands that building a just society requires not popularity but principle. True leaders don't exploit fear, they transcend it. They do not conceal failure, they confront it. They do not merely survive political storms, they weather them with integrity. Knowing the nation watches not only what they accomplish, but how they accomplish it. Jamaica cannot modernize its economy without first modernizing its politics. Development is not just about highways, fiscal targets, or foreign investment, especially when not realized by the poor and disadvantaged. It's about dignity, justice, and shared opportunity. These cannot flourish where governance is weak, accountability is absent, and power is hoarded rather than shared. Time come now for both major political parties to shift from transactional politics to transformational leadership. Jamaicans are yearning for something more. Leadership that is visionary rather than tactical, courageous rather than convenient, inclusive rather than insular. That journey requires more than managerial competence. It demands moral courage. What is needed now is a new national covenant, one that transcends party lines and election cycles, a collective commitment to democratic renewal, to strengthen our constitution, fortify independent institutions, and restore the integrity of public life. Such a moment calls for a convergence of courage, from government and opposition, from civil society and private sector, from every citizen who believes that Jamaica's destiny is greater than its dysfunction. This is the moment to reimagine what political leadership looks like. Not one man's vision, but a national pact rooted in participation, fairness, and shared sacrifice. This is not the time for calculation. It is the time for conviction. Leadership is not about winning the next election. It's about planting seeds of transformation, even when one may never see the harvest. We're at a crossroads. One road leads to further erosion, a politics of spectacle, empty slogans, and diminishing faith. The other demands sacrifice, but promises something greater. A nation made whole by truth, justice, and unity. Let us choose the harder but correct path. Who's coming to Jamaica's rescue? As a reminder, if you're not registered to vote, September 30, 2025 is the deadline to register for the November 30 voters list. Next year, March 31, 2026, that's the deadline to register for the March 31, 2026 voters list if you miss this November one. I hope you're continuing to enjoy the journey, finding it educational, useful, and ting. Jamaica's journey to becoming a republic is at a crossroads for true. One road leads to further erosion. The other demands sacrifice, but promises something greater. Who's coming to Jamaica's rescue? I don't know. But knowing we brought forward heroes like Marcus Garvey, Samuel Sharp, Paul Bogle, and William George Gordon, I'm still confident the journey will end with Jamaica becoming a republic, a truly and fully independent and sovereign Jamaica, land we love. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Podcast Index, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Apple, iHeart, Radio, and Amazon Music. If you want to hear about anything, if you want to reason about anything, or if you can't find any of the material I was talking about, you can email me at atasteofja@outlook.com. So until the next time, thank you for supporting this podcast. Please subscribe, like, follow, and share it with your friends and family. And again, I thank you for taking the time to listen. One love. Yes, the word is love.